Welcome once again to Jesus or Muhammad, where we talk a lot about Jesus. We talk a lot about Muhammad. We do shows defending the core teachings of Christianity. We also address Islam because someone has to do it. Muslims are not getting the truth about Islam from their leaders. They're not getting the truth about Islam from our leaders. They're not getting the truth about Islam from their families. They're not getting the truth about Islam from the media. Someone has to tell Muslims the truth about Islam and the truth about Christianity. So we're doing our part to the best of our ability. Today, given the times we live in, we want to address ISIS. I don't know of anyone who wouldn't be familiar with what's going on in the world, in the Middle East right now, but you have a group that is claiming to obey the commands of Allah and the teachings of Muhammad, a group that is violently subjugating unbelievers, a group that is forcing Christians to pay the jizya or to convert or to die, a group that is raping their female captives, a group that is killing even other Muslims, so Shia Muslims. Now, what we've been told over and over again is that this group cannot represent true Islam. This group cannot represent true Islam. Well, why can't it represent true Islam? Well, because they're doing things that Islam condemns. The group is doing things that Islam condemns, and therefore this group cannot be Islamic. Let me give you two quotations here. One is from President Barack Obama, who addressed the nation, and here's what he said about ISIS. He said, now let's make two things clear. ISIL is one of the variations of ISIS, or the Islamic State. Now let's make two things clear. ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim. And ISIL is certainly not a state. ISIL is a terrorist organization, pure and simple, and it has no vision other than the slaughter of all who stand in its way. So, notice the claims against ISIS. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim. So, ISIL is killing innocent people, and it's killing Muslims. Islam condemns that sort of thing, according to President Barack Obama, and therefore, ISIS has nothing to do with Islam. It's actually violating the commands of Islam. That's one quotation. I wanted to quote another politician. This is a liberal Muslim who is a British politician named Maajid Nawaz. He says something very, very different about ISIS and Islam. Here's what he said. We Muslims must admit there are challenging Quranic passages that require reinterpretation today. Let us use existing tools of exegesis, such as specificity, restriction, abrogation, and metaphor. Vacuous literalism as an interpretive method must be abandoned. So literalism, just going with what Islam commands, just focusing on what it says. Vacuous literalism as an interpretive method must be abandoned. It is bankrupt. Only by rejecting vacuous literalism are we able to condemn, in principle, ISIS-style slavery, beheading, lashing, amputation, and other medieval practices forever, all of which are in the Quran. This is a struggle within Islam. Reformers either win and get religion-neutral politics, or lose and get ISIL-style theocracy. Notice what he says here. If you just go with a straightforward reading of the Quran and do what it says, you end up with an ISIL-style theocracy. And so it's people who want to reform and reinterpret the commands who have to win. If you don't successfully reform and reinterpret Islam and the Quran, you end up with an ISIL-style theocracy. So these are two very different things we're hearing about the relationship between ISIS and Islam. According to President Barack Obama, ISIS has nothing to do with this. According to Maajid Nawaz, given this, ISIL is exactly what you would expect to find. And so Why would Majid Nawaz, who again is a sort of liberal Muslim, why would he think that what ISIS is doing has anything to do with Islam? Well, we're going to look at top 10 Quran verses for understanding ISIS. We could go into many more, and if you really want a full picture, you also have to go into the Hadith and the Sirah and the Tafsir, because a lot of what ISIS is doing is going to have precedence in the life of Muhammad. But we're just going to look at some Quran verses, and just by reading a few Quran verses, we can get an understanding, a very good understanding of ISIS, and we can see why. We can see why I would say ISIS is following Islam to the letter. So let's go ahead and have a little countdown here. Number 10, chapter 3, verse 32 of the Quran. If you've noticed, ISIL doesn't seem to have a lot of sympathy or love for non-Muslims. Why is that? Chapter 3, verse 32 of the Quran, say, obey Allah and the Apostle, but if they turn back, then surely Allah does not love the unbelievers. Allah does not love unbelievers. So if someone hears the message and they turn away from it, keep in mind Allah has no love for that person. If it's a woman who refuses to convert to Islam, Allah has no love for her. And that can affect how you treat her. And if it's a man who turns away from Islam, what are you going to do to that person? Guess what? Allah doesn't care much. Allah doesn't care much because Allah has no love for that person. It's very different from what you find in Matthew chapter 5, for instance, where Jesus says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you so that you may be like your Father who is in heaven. According to the Bible, God loves all of us. Very different from what you get in Islam. That's number 10. Number 9, chapter 48, verse 29 of the Quran. So now we've seen Allah does not love unbelievers, and now we're going to see that it affects how we're to be treated. So it's not Allah doesn't love those people, but still be as nice and gentle as possible with them. It's Allah doesn't love those people, now here's how you treat them, to go along with how Allah thinks of them. Chapter 48, verse 29. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are severe against unbelievers and merciful among themselves. Those who are with Muhammad, so if you are really a follower of Muhammad, if you really believe in Muhammad, you will be severe against unbelievers and merciful among themselves, among your fellow Muslims. Just going with that little verse right there, you have to be severe against the unbelievers, only show mercy towards your fellow Muslims. Doesn't that sound a lot like ISIS? It doesn't sound like our Western Muslim friends who treat everyone with love and respect. Doesn't sound like that at all. So if we just had these couple of verses so far to go with, I think we'd see that ISIS seems to be right on the money as far as how you are to treat unbelievers. That's chapter 48, verse 29. Number 8, chapter 4, verse 24. So you are to be severe against unbelievers. And you could do this in a variety of ways. When it comes to women, there is a certain way that you can be severe against them to show them what contempt your God has for them because they are unbelievers. And what you get to do with them is make them into your sex slaves, to degrade them in that way. The verse here is chapter 4, verse 24 of the Quran. It's not exactly clear without knowing the historical context. Muslims always tell us, hey, you have to know the context. Great. I say I agree completely. We need to know the context of this verse. But the context doesn't help. Muslims are just trained to say that because not a lot of people know the context of various Quran verses. And so it allows Muslims to say, oh, you're quoting this verse? Oh, the context shows that it's completely peaceful and tolerant. No, it doesn't. Not for any of these verses. So we'll go ahead and look at the context to see what this is actually saying. But let's just read the verse, and then we'll look at the context. Chapter 4, verse 24. Also forbidden are women already married, except those captives and slaves whom your right hands possess. The word captives and slaves, it's in parentheses because the Haleli Khan translation, the official translation of Saudi Arabia, is explaining what the term right hands possess means. There are people whom your right hands possess. That means they're under your control. They're your slaves or captives. So also forbidden are women already married, except those captives and slaves whom your right hands possess. This is talking about who you can take as your sexual partners. Married women are forbidden, except your captives and slaves. You don't get to have sex with a woman who is married unless she's your captive or slave. Notice what that means. You can have sex with a married woman if you've captured her or she's your slave. Even if she's married, you can have sex with her. Now let's look at the historical background because we see what this verse actually means. Sunan Abu Dawud 2150. The Apostle of Allah sent a military expedition to Autas on the occasion of the Battle of Hunain. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of the Apostle of Allah were reluctant to have intercourse with the female captives in the presence of their husbands who were unbelievers. So think about this. In previous battles, Allah had already revealed that it was okay to have sex with your female captives. But usually the men are killed, the men die in battle, you take female captives, and you're not committing adultery or anything, their husbands are dead. You're still using them as your sex slaves and so on, but it's not like the women are married anymore, their husbands are dead. At this battle, the Muslims captured the men and the women. They captured the men and the women. So they captured men and their wives, women and their husbands. And so now the question arose, well, we know we're allowed to have sex with our female captives, but does that also apply to women who are married, women whose husbands are still alive? That gives the impression that it's adultery, right? If you have sex with a woman, but you've captured her and her husband, then that woman is married. It sounds like adultery to have sex with a female captive who is married. So they were worried. They didn't want to have sex with the women because the women are married. The Muslims didn't want to accidentally commit adultery and get in trouble with Allah. So some of the companions of the Apostle of Allah were reluctant to have intercourse with the female captives in the presence of their husbands who were unbelievers. So Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, and all married women are forbidden unto you, save those captives whom your right hands possess. That is to say, they are lawful for them when they complete their waiting period. So, think about this. Muslim men go to Muhammad. Muhammad, we captured women with their husbands. Can we have sex with them? Allah reveals Surah 4:24. Married women are forbidden to you unless they're your captives and slave girls. So, you can have sex with them all you want. Is there a group in the world who is going out into battle, taking women captive, and then doing whatever they want with these women? Yes, there is a group. It's called ISIS. So ISIS, which is being condemned for taking female captives and slave girls, this is what we're told. This can't be a religion that is actually representing Islam. This can't have anything to do with Islam. That's what we're being told when we look, and everything they're doing is exactly what Muhammad and the Quran say they can do. So just keep that in mind. Islam allows Muslim men to have sex with their captives, even if the women are married. They're your property now. Chapter 5, verse 33 of the Quran. This is very important because it's the verse that comes right after the most misquoted and misused verse of the Quran in the West. If you've heard, as I've heard over and over again from everyone up to and including the President of the United States, if you've heard people say, Islam condemns the killing of innocents. How does Islam condemn the killing of innocents? Islam says in the Quran, if anyone killed a man, it is as if he has killed all mankind. The President has said that. All kinds of leaders around the world have said that. I've seen it on a variety of news sites. Islam says if you kill an innocent, if you kill someone, it's as if you've killed all mankind. Well, that would definitely be very peaceful if that's what Islam commands people to do. That's not what it commands. And what's interesting is when you read this verse and actually read the verse that follows, you get a completely opposite picture of what people are telling us the Quran teaches. So we're focusing on 533. We're going to read the verse before it just for the context and just to show what happens and how things are being misrepresented by politicians in the media. Chapter 5, verse 32 of the Quran. For this reason did we prescribe to the children of Israel. Notice that part almost always gets left off. This was a teaching of the children of Israel. It's a what follows is actually a quotation from the Jewish Talmud. This is a quotation that was a Jewish teaching. For this reason did we prescribe to the children of Israel that whoever slays a soul, unless it be for manslaughter or for mischief in the land, it is as though he slew all men. And whoever keeps it alive, it is as though he kept alive all men. And certainly our apostles came to them with clear arguments, but even after that, many of them certainly act extravagantly in the land. So when you actually read what the verse says, this is a teaching of the children of Israel. Well, where's the teaching that is for Muslims? That brings us to the very next verse, which is 533, which tells us what Muslims are supposed to do. The punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His apostle and strive to make mischief in the land is only this, that they should be murdered or crucified, or their hands and their feet should be cut off on opposite sides, or they should be imprisoned. This shall be as a disgrace for them in this world, and in the hereafter they shall have a grievous chastisement. What's the penalty for, and by the way, how do you make war on Allah? How do you make war on Allah? By making mischief in the land, right? Notice that is a very vague crime. Making mischief in the land is a very vague crime, but that's how you're actually making war against Allah. According to Islamic commentators like Ibn Kathir, this vague crime of making mischief even includes unbelief. The point here is there are all kinds of brutal penalties, including death, dismemberment, and crucifixion, for this vague crime of making mischief in a land. Why is this important? Well, you can pack all kinds of things. If you want to go kill someone, you can say, look, you're making mischief in the land somehow. Now, the reason this is important is you can understand terrorist attacks, you can understand a lot of what ISIS is doing, you can understand what Al-Qaeda is doing just by understanding this verse. When it talks about making mischief in the land, the penalty will sort of depend on the crime. If you're making a little bit of mischief, maybe you get exiled or something like that. If you're causing a real problem, the penalty there is death. So, if you're the United States military, for instance, a Muslim would say, oh, you've made mischief in Iraq, you've made mischief in Syria, you've made mischief in Afghanistan, you've made mischief in Israel by protecting Israel, you're making mischief all over the place. What's the penalty for the American military? Penalty is death. But here's the problem. According to Muhammad himself, those who fund or support a military or soldier receive the same reward or penalty as the military or the soldier. So what he means here is soldiers usually can't just go out and fight on their own for very long. They have to be funded. You have to be paid. Someone has to be paying the bills for these soldiers to go out and fight. According to Muhammad, the people who fund the military are equally responsible for what the military does, because the military wouldn't be able to do that if someone wasn't funding them. So according to Muhammad, people who fund the military are to receive the same penalty as the military. Think about this. What's the penalty for the U.S. military or the British military or any Western military who's done anything that would qualify as making mischief? The penalty is death. But anyone who funds that military is equally responsible. Who pays the bills for the American military? The American taxpayer. If you're an American, you pay your taxes, you have funded the American military. What's the penalty? It's the same penalty for you that it is for the actual people who are going out and fighting in other places. The penalty is death. And that's why Al-Qaeda would not hesitate to bring down towers. And that was exactly Osama bin Laden's response when he's accused of killing innocent people on 9/11. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? These are people who fund, who pay their bills, who pay their taxes. They pay for the American military to come in and cause all these problems in Muslim lands. So according to Islam, the killing of what President Obama would classify as innocents or something like that, they don't exist. If you're just an unbeliever, you're not innocent. If you've rejected Islam, you're not innocent. If you've supported anyone who's ever done anything against Islam, you're not innocent. Especially if you're part of a nation like the United States, you're under a penalty of death. And that's why you can take reporters, British and American reporters, or people who've come over there to help in some way, That's why you can take them and chop their heads off if you want. They're under a death penalty, so you can do whatever you want with them. They're under a penalty of death. So however you think they're going to help your community, that's what you can do. That's what you find if you actually read the Muslim sources. And yet, we are told over and over again, none of this can have anything to do with Islam. Let's keep going through here. I wanted to go into detail on a couple of those because they're important, but we can go through the rest of these pretty quickly. Number 6, chapter 9, verse 5 of the Quran. This is called the verse of the sword. Muhammad conquered Mecca, and so the Meccans were now subjugated, but eventually he was going to outlaw polytheism and so on. And we have in chapter 9, verse 5, when the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, and take them captive, and besiege them, and prepare for them each ambush. But if they repent and establish worship and pay the poor due, then leave their way free. Lo, Allah is forgiving, merciful. Notice what he says here. You've got a certain number of months. Leave them alone for those certain number of months. When those sacred months have passed, slay them wherever you find them. So you have a couple of months as far as the early revelation, because people have been living there a long time, and they were going to have some time to think about what they're going to do. But once the sacred months are over, you've given them the time to think it over, then kill them wherever you find them, unless they turn to Islam. So where does ISIS get the idea they're supposed to fight people until they convert to Islam, and that they can kill people who refuse to convert to Islam? They're not making this up. This is not some weird handbook that they got that doesn't teach Islam. This is coming directly from the Quran itself, and of course the Hadith. Number 5 first. Chapter 9, verse 29. If there are only a couple of verses you wanted to learn on jihad, 9:29 would certainly be one of them. This is the command to fight Christians and Jews, specifically for being Christians and Jews, until we pay the jizya. If you've been following the news, ISIS gives Christians the opportunity to pay the jizya. So if you want to pay tribute money to Muslims, you can do that and remain a Christian. And as long as you follow all the rules and don't get out of line, then you can continue being a Christian and paying jizya. Otherwise, you better start running or convert to Islam, because they will kill you. Where does that come from? Chapter 9, verse 29. Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden, which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, from among the people of the book are Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So you have a command from Allah to fight Jews and Christians, specifically because of what they believe, until they submit and pay tribute to the Muslim community. So notice, this is exactly what ISIS is doing. They're fighting the unbelievers. They're having sex with their female captives. They're telling Christians that they can pay the jizya if they want to remain Christians. They're doing everything that Islam commands them to do, and our leaders point to the things they're doing that are found directly in the Quran and saying, you see there, this can't be Islam because no religion teaches this. Well, yeah, if you don't bother to read what the religion actually teaches, but we can go through the Quran and read what it teaches. Number 4, chapter 9, verse 73. Remember the part? ISIS is going after other Muslims, and therefore they can't be Islamic. Chapter 9, verse 73 of the Quran. O Prophet, strive hard, and the strive hard there is a variation of jihad. O Prophet, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites, and be unyielding to them. And their abode is hell, and evil is the destination. If you're a Shia, are you a good Muslim according to ISIS? No, you're a hypocrite. If you're even a Sunni, but you're not joining ISIS or you're resisting ISIS, are you a good Muslim? No, you're a hypocrite. Because Allah commands you to wage jihad and subjugate unbelievers, and therefore to get in the way of that, you're not a real Muslim according to them. So here you have a direct command to Muhammad to fight not only unbelievers, but also hypocrites, people who say that they are Muslim but are not doing what Islam commands. So ISIS is going out and doing what? They're fighting unbelievers and hypocrites. Where'd they get that idea? Because according to our leaders, Islam doesn't teach that. Islam condemns that sort of thing. They get that directly from the Quran. Now, you need to expand that through the Hadith and so on. You find out that if someone is sort of severe hypocrite, they're not doing the fundamental things that Islam requires them to do, they're actually in the apostate category. You can just chop their heads off. So these are the things that ISIS is doing, and it comes directly from the Muslim sources. And then again, that's when our leaders point to it and say, you see, this can't be Islamic because they're doing it. Doing what? Doing exactly what the Quran teaches? That means they're not Muslim? So who are the real Muslims? The people who don't do what this book says? Very, very odd definition of Islam we have here. Number 3, in case you're wondering what these verses about fighting people actually mean. Maybe it means, I've had Muslims tell me this, well, it means like, debating or discussing. It's just using the word fight, but that's not actually what it means. Here's the verse, chapter 9, verse 111. Surely Allah has bought of the believers their persons and their property for this, that they shall have the garden. They fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain. What is fighting in Allah's way? Does it mean debating? No, it involves slaying and getting slain, killing until you get killed. So if you're wondering what these verses on fighting mean, he tells you. It involves killing until you get killed. It's number 3. Number 2, chapter 47, verse 35. Be not weary and faint-hearted, crying for peace when you should be uppermost. For Allah is with you and will never put you in loss for your good deeds. Be not weary and faint-hearted, crying for peace when you should be uppermost. There are times when the Muslim community is not in a position to conquer others. In those situations, Muslims are commanded to promote peace and tolerance because that's what's in the best interest of the Muslim community. There are other situations where Muslims are in a position to take over, to subjugate, to rape their female captives, to force Christians to pay the jizya, to force people to repent or to turn to Islam. They're in a position to do that. When they are able to do that, they are commanded to do that. They are not allowed to seek peace when they should be uppermost. This is a command of the Quran. So all the people who are condemning ISIS for taking over when they're in a position to do so, that's exactly what the Quran tells them to do. So what is ISIS being condemned for? Finally, number 1. It's the number 1 verse for understanding ISIS. And this has nothing to do with jihad. It has something to do with understanding jihad. Chapter 2, verse 106. Whatever communications we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or like it. Do you not know that Allah has power over all things? This is where the doctrine of abrogation comes from in the Quran. Well, this and other verses. But whatever verses we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring something better than it or like it. Allah can change His commands. He can tell you to do one thing, and then He can come along later and tell you to do something completely different. The reason this is important is, here in the West, there are peaceful verses of the Quran that Muslims can point to and that our leaders will point to and say, you see, Islam is peaceful. What they're ignoring is that Islam has a method of interpretation. If a verse of the Quran tells you to do one thing, and another verse of the Quran tells you to do something else, and they contradict each other, the only question for a Muslim is which one came last? Because that's the one that abrogates or cancels the earlier revelation. That's the method of interpretation you find in Islam. The verses we quoted, most of the verses we're looking at here, are from some of the last chapters of the Quran ever to be revealed. Chapter 9, where we got 929, 973, 9111, 95, that was the last major chapter of the Quran revealed to Muhammad. The only one after it was 110, and that's just a couple of verses. So these are the final marching orders of Islam, and its commands to violently subjugate people anytime you have the opportunity to do so. That's what ISIS is doing. They're doing exactly what Islam says. The peaceful, tolerant verses, those are abrogated or canceled, and yet what our leaders and Muslim organizations like CARE and ISNA insist on here in the West is that the peaceful, abrogated verses, that's true Islam. And all the violent passages, that has nothing to do with Islam. And there is something that has nothing to do with Islam here, but that's sort of the westernized, watered-down, whitewashed version of Islam that we're being taught and fed by politicians and the media. True Islam, if you want to know what true Islam is, watch the news and watch what ISIS is doing, because what they're doing is as close as you can get to reading the Hadith and the Quran on what the early Muslim community did. So, those are the top 10 verses for understanding ISIS. We'll have more on ISIS and jihad on future episodes of Jesus or Muhammad.